And Lyssa, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Great, thank you. I was trying to get my slide share to where it would move, and obviously it just decides to go wonky on me. So thank you so much for that wonderful introduction. I feel like I have a pressure on me being called a nationally recognized expert, but I really appreciate it. So today we're going to talk about web accessibility standards and a little bit about the laws behind those, just so you leave here today with a really good framework for the laws and how they pertain to your work and how to kind of start thinking about those standards and how to apply them to everything that you produce, whether it is web content or document content. That's a little bit of a focus here. And before I get started, I just want to make sure the screen is sharing appropriately and there's nothing like blocking your view from the videos. Good on that. And I'm watching the chat a little bit. So if you pop some answers in the chat, I'll try to ask you some questions throughout the chat as well. So is everybody able to see me, see the screen? Okay, got a thumbs up. Thank you. All right, so wanted to tell you a little bit more about me. So as Eileen mentioned, I'm the ICT Accessibility Program Manager with Oklahoma Able Tech, which is the peer program for the Missouri Assistive Technology Program in Oklahoma. I am a white woman in my 30s. I wear glasses. I have somewhat coppery red hair, and in the slide that I have on the screen right now, I have my dog with me. Her name is Penny, and she is technically always my co-presenter. I do work from home, so she's actually next to me right now. Hopefully, she stays quiet throughout this presentation today. All right. Now, just to kind of get started, we're going to kind of start with WCAG, and then I'll kind of back out and move into some more general discussion. But I just want to ask you all first, who knows what WCAG actually is before I define it or anything? So if you want to either unmute, looks like we have a pretty small group today, or you can pop some answers in the chat. I'm happy to participate that way. All right, got someone saying web content accessibility guidelines. Great. All right, so you all are already on your way to being experts. Some of you are, you may be experts in the room too. So yes, they are the web content accessibility guidelines, and that's what we'll be talking about today. Has anyone read through the documents that pertain to web content accessibility guidelines, or is this something you're still just, I don't really know what's going on with that? I see Laura Plummer, hello, I recognize you from a lot of our other trainings, so hi to you. So I know you've read through the WCAG stuff, so Gabe says yes as well. So we've got a few people in the room who've actually read through these, which is awesome. All right. I've got someone saying yes, but less familiar with recent updates. Yeah, that's a good problem to have, or a problem we see pretty often. Okay, so like I mentioned, our roadmap for today, we're kind of going to cover a little bit about what accessibility is as it pertains to digital content in particular. We're going to cover a little bit of the laws and standards, and then we're going to see a couple of standards and actions so you kind of see the breakdown of what those mean in WCAG. All right, so I wanted to kind of start off talking a little bit about disability in general, and to give you the statistic that's kind of good for anyone who's working in the digital accessibility space or disability space to know. So at least 1 billion people, which is about 15% of the world's population, have a recognized disability. So this is a good statistic to know, and I've seen other numbers go as high as about 20%. So I know this is a number that's kind of debated, but it's quite a few people. And if you don't consider these standards that we're talking about today, then you're leaving out a good portion of your potential audience. So I know those of you who in this room probably already, really well versed in this and know that this is what you should do, but I do like sharing the statistic in general. All right, so what physical accessibility accommodations have you seen in everyday life? So I'll ask you to participate again, either unmute or pop some answers in the chat and just let me know what physical accessibility accommodations you've seen in everyday life. And no trick question, curb cuts. Yeah, I asked this in a training last week too, and I got curb cuts for the first time, first response. So it's interesting that that's happening again today. Designated seating is another good one. All right, anybody else? Ramps? All right, awesome. So those are all really great. Oh, now they're all coming in fast. Buttons to open doors, lever door handles. Yeah, all those are wonderful physical accessibility accommodations. So I kind of wanted to, I'll just use the ramps example in particular. Ramps are obviously built for the purpose of helping folks who have disabilities get up into a building, but they're also useful for folks who maybe are pushing strollers or maybe have broken a leg and are on crutches, and it's easier for them to get a ramp than a stair. So, this is kind of illustrating that these physical accessibility accommodations, they really help not just folks with disabilities, but everyone. So that's kind of the point I want to, or one of the points I want you to leave here with today is accessibility features benefit everyone. All right, so let's talk about digital accessibility and how that's defined to kind of bring it back down from the physical side. So I love this quote. This is from the Office of Civil Rights. It's a really long definition, but I actually have the middle portions kind of on a sticky on my computer so that it reminds me every day kind of why I'm doing this work. Accessible means that individuals with disabilities are able to independently acquire the same information, engage in the same interactions, and enjoy the same services within the same time frame as individuals without disabilities. And the last bit is with substantially equivalent ease of use. So that's really the definition that we're looking at. And the standards that we'll talk about today, it really gives us a shared language so that we can actually accomplish these 4 points. So that same information, same interaction, same services, same time frame. All right, now, before we get into standards, we're going to talk about a little bit about civil rights protection. So you probably are all familiar with the ADA, especially if you were all answering my question about physical disabilities and accommodations. So the ADA was passed in 1990, short for the Americans with Disabilities Act. And we have 3 titles that are pretty important in this particular ruling. So that's Title I, access to employment. Title II, access to public sector programs, services, and activities. Title III, access to places of public accommodation. So those are the 3 areas that the ADA really focuses on. And there has been some debate, and we'll kind of cover a little bit about the Department of Justice here in a second, about whether or not the ADA actually applies to digital content. So I just kind of want you to know that going in, the ADA doesn't necessarily have anything in it pertaining to digital accessibility, which does cause problems in our field, as you will see. All right, Section 508 was passed in 1998. It was actually a tag on to the Rehabilitation Act of 1973. But this is one of the first laws in the United States that actually referenced digital accessibility in particular. So what it actually says, it was refreshed in 2018. So in 2018, it actually became tied to WCAG 2.0 AA. So it covers web and non-web content specifically in this law. But the caveat is this really only applies to things created, maintained, or acquired under a federal contract. So again, this isn't something within the ADA, it's part of that Federal Rehabilitation Act of 1973. And it only pertains to things that are receiving federal money or at the federal level. Sorry, my dog is now deciding to be a little verbal, so I hope you're not hearing all that. All right, so kind of already gone over the Federal Rehabilitation Act a little bit, but it has similar aspects to ADA. And it basically, the ADA expanded this. So Title I expanded Section 503. Title II expanded Section 504. But on that Title III side, what expanded that? What expanded Section 508? There's really not anything until recently with Department of Justice response to basically a bunch of lawsuits that are happening within the US over whether or not digital accessibility is covered under the ADA. So I don't know if any of you have heard of the Domino's case in particular. There was a blind individual who was trying to order a pizza, and I guess the phone lines were busy, I believe, and they couldn't actually use the website or the web app to order a pizza. So that's gone through the Supreme Court, and it's kind of interesting to see follow up on that case. So I'd recommend you checking that out if you have time. But anyway, the response from the Department of Justice was basically just to provide some guidance on web accessibility in the ADA. they didn't necessarily put any teeth into it. So I think a lot of people in the digital accessibility space are a little frustrated with how this has come out, and it's going to be interesting to see if this has enough oomph behind it to actually force folks in the public sector in particular to make their content accessible. All right, wanted to talk a little bit about normative versus informative too. So you may be wondering what in the heck I'm talking about. And this will really apply as we get down to talking about the standards in particular. So WCAG success criteria are normative, meaning that they're testable. So you'll see that word, and any of you who've gone through the WCAG documentation have probably seen this definition. So there's a big difference between normative and informative. And there are pieces of the WCAG documentation that are informative, kind of the ones that talk about what this standard set is and all of that. But the success criteria themselves are the testable pieces, and they are normative. So if you think about that definition, the Department of Justice guidance, is only informative. It's not normative. So that's why I'm worried, and I know others are in the space as well, that this is not actually going to, have any impactful meaning in the long run. It's a step in the right direction, but not necessarily quite what we needed potentially. Okay, now let's get into the meat of WCAG. So in particular, when we think about 508, and you probably hear those used interchangeably, like 508 meaning digital accessibility. Well, hopefully the description I gave a little bit earlier kind of lets you know what specifically that 508 law refers to as far as federal spaces, and the fact that it does reference WCAG 2.0 AA, but it's not really covering all the bases, obviously. Some states may have different laws. I know in Oklahoma, we do have the Electronic and Information Technology Act, which does refer to WCAG 2.0 AA as well. All right, so interestingly enough, WCAG 2.0 AA is what Section 508 currently refers to, but WCAG 2.1, which is the upgraded version, actually came out in 2018. So the Section 508 law is already a little bit behind, unfortunately. So just so you know, that's kind of where we're at. Laws move really slowly, and so right now, there is a current standard of 2.1 that you can be referring to and looking at if you want to kind of get ahead of the curve. But for now, as far as what you're required to do for anything that's federally funded or state funded in some cases is WCAG 2.0 AA. All right, so WCAG itself is an international standard. And it is created by the W3C, which for those of you who don't know, the W3C stands for the World Wide Web Consortium. I throw a lot of acronyms out. I'm so sorry to our captioner and to all of you, but W3C stands for World Wide Web Consortium, and they have a section of their organization called Web Accessibility Initiative, WAI. So if you hear me say W3C, WAI, that's the set of the worldwide body for the web that actually has pushed out these web content accessibility guidelines standards. So this is something that the US is actually a little bit behind on versus some other countries. There are some countries who actually are fully up to date with WCAG 2.1 even. So it's kind of a little bit sad, but again, we know how long laws take to pass and all of that. So. All right, someone might be unmuted. Right. All right, so for the WCAG versions, I kind of mentioned them a little bit, but I don't want to leave you hanging on what those actually mean. So leaving out any discussion of WCAG 1.0, I don't know if any of you were looking at digital accessibility when WCAG 1.0 was around, but it was a very different set of standards. So WCAG 2.0 is the one we're starting with and we're talking about, because WCAG 1.0 is very, very old and doesn't really even resemble anything like WCAG 2.0 does. So WCAG 2.0 was the kind of revamp to modernize this accessibility standard that the W3C WAI had put out. And then in 2018, when they were refreshed, we went to 2.1. So now these are all nested, and that's something you're going to see across WCAG in general. Everything is nested. So WCAG 2.1 only added some success criteria. It did not remove anything. So everything in WCAG 2.0 is also in 2.1. Now, again, we're a little bit behind in the US. There's actually about to be a new set of standards from WCAG, which is 2.2. It's in draft version right now. So if you even want to get more ahead of the curve than 2.1, those documents are kind of already available for you, and you can go see what that W3C group is working on as far as the next set of standards. But again, it's going to be all inclusive. So it's just going to add a few more success criteria, and it will then include all of 2.1 and 2.0. And I think that's pretty evident too. I'll show you a document that I really, really like that helps you kind of understand more how to meet these success criteria and these standards. It's probably the best and most easy to understand thing that the W3C has put out, in my opinion. All right, so let's get down to the WCAG structure. So again, this is nested. When we think of WCAG structure, we think about the principles first, and I'll go over those principles here in a second, but those are all encompassing. Those are the four big guiding lights for WCAG and what we're trying to obtain, or sorry, not obtain, attain with our success criteria as we're moving through. And then under those principles, we have guidelines. And so those break the principles down into a few more, it's 12 or 13, depending upon if you're in 2.1 or 2.0, some more specific areas to kind of focus down on. And then underneath that, we have success criteria. So success criteria are those testable pieces. And that's something I want to kind of stick with you. So those are they normative or informative success criteria? I'll just do a little quick quiz to make sure you're catching on. Also, while I'm paused here, I see Angela has kind of put a fun comment in. I did not realize that, could they not just change the law wording to current WCAG standards? Sorry, I agree, Angela, that would be so great. I don't really understand how the government works in general. I will say that this is my least favorite thing to talk about when we talk about accessibility, but yeah, it seems like they could sort of put wording in there to let it move with the times a little bit more. So yeah, awesome. Okay, so I'm gonna just give you guys the answer. Success criteria are normative because they are testable, right? They're not just informative. They're forming the test bed for what we're looking for as far as WCAG goes. All right, let's talk a little bit more about the 4 principles. So there are 4 of them, and honestly, this is how I first learned accessibility. I kind of went through all of WCAG and overwhelmed myself quite a bit, which I don't want to do to you all. But anyway, this is where you start really for anyone. So we talk about the POUR principles, and they are perceivable, operable, understandable, and robust. And if you kind of break those down, I've tried to put them into more plain language so that you maybe can adopt them a little easier, but perceivable means that information must be visible to all the senses. So this is where we talk about having text alternatives for images, or having color that actually is visible to those who maybe have color blindness or low vision. So making sure that contrast is high enough. That's what we think about when we're talking about perceivable. So we're thinking about those senses, and whatever senses the individuals we're serving have access to. All right, then we have operable. So this is basically just indicating that no matter how they are accessing this document or this website or web application, they can actually access it with whether that's with a keyboard, a switch device, any other type of AAC, anything like that. That's what we're thinking about when we think about operable. Understandable gets a little bit more subjective in a way, but basically think of it like your content is written clearly. and the interactions actually make sense. So if somebody clicks on this button, it doesn't do something that completely throws them off, right? So understandable is a pretty broad principle. And there's sometimes a lot to do with understandable, and then the next one, robust, that we as maybe content managers or designers can't necessarily do too much about. That's kind of falls along the developer side of things. But anyway, getting a little ahead of myself there. And then robust is the most technical of these 4 principles, but it basically means that whatever technology you're building in, it holds up to time and changes in technology. So it's kind of just making sure that you're following the standard set so that if the technology changes in the long run, you're still going to be able to use whatever it is. So this one's the hardest to explain and the least easy to give examples on. All right, I'm going to go ahead and skip that one. So we're going to talk a little bit more about success criteria levels as well. So this is one more bit of nesting that we'll talk about. And the success criteria are broken down into 3 different levels. That's A, AA, and AAA. So I mentioned a few times already that WCAG is broken down into, Section 508 refers to WCAG 2.0 AA. So we're looking at this level here. I don't know if you can see my mouse. I hope you can. We're looking at this AA 2.0 version for basically our minimum level of accessibility for most groups at this point in time, given our current law and standard set. So now, just like with the principles and guidelines and the versions of WCAG, we have AAA, which includes everything in AA and A. AA includes everything in A, and A is just kind of its own group by itself. So if you are trying to meet WCAG 2.0 AA, you're going to need to make sure and look at all the success criteria that are marked level A and all the ones that are marked level AA. Now, a quick mention on AAA. There are some success criteria that are marked AAA that I would argue are pretty easy to meet. So, if you want to go above and beyond, you can always look at some of the AAA criteria and see if you can actually accomplish any of those. But again, for compliance level, look at accessibility. AA is really the most that we're looking at. All right. Does anyone have any questions at this point? I'll pause for a second before we dive a little bit more into some of these specific success criteria. That's a tongue twister sometimes. Hopefully I have not just bored you to death. Again, this stuff it's kind of dense. Just get a smile. Yeah. All right, doesn't look like anyone has any questions, but we'll just move on and kind of hope to get you a little bit of practice. And then we'll kind of narrow down into how this actually applies to documents too, because that's also a fun discussion. All right, so let's break down one of these success criteria. So we're going to look at success criteria 1.1.1. So again, thinking of that nesting piece, we have principle 1, which is perceivable, that this success criteria is under. And then we have guideline 1.1, which is text alternatives. So that is going to be the broad grouping of the success criteria that go underneath this. So success criteria 1.1.1 in particular talks about non-text content. It is a level A success criteria. So that means that this is the lowest hanging fruit for success criteria. Now, I'm just going to give you all a little quiz. I know some of you in the room have already done quite a bit with WCAG and probably do some testing on your own already. So the success criteria 1.1.1 non-text content, what does that actually refer to? Like, what are we trying to accomplish with this success criteria? And this is a tough question, so. Got descriptions of images. Yep, that is one example. Alt text and such, yep. All right, does anyone have any other ideas of what this could mean? And it's okay if you don't. But Gabe is spot on with alt text and why not? Got someone saying colors. It could potentially, depending upon how color is used to convey information, but typically color might fall more under 1.3.1, but we'll talk about that here in a minute too. Links could also be potentially under there, depending upon how that link is built. So the other one that I see a lot in this success criteria is actually like linked images. So it's the same as with an image that's not got a link attached to it. But if a linked image is missing alt text or is not given an accessible name any other way, then the person who encounters that link and is not visibly seeing that link, so whether they're hearing it via screen reader or they're encountering it via a braille display device, it's not going to have a name, so they're not going to have any idea what this link is going to go to. It's basically just going to announce link and then nothing. So yeah, Laura's given an example of a logo. So a lot of not home pages, but just website design in general has a logo that links to your home page. We see alt text missing on that one a lot. So this would fall under this 1.1.1 non-text content. So okay. Got videos with no captions or audio. I feel like that falls under a different success criteria, but you bring up a good point, Megan. This is also, I'll just kind of pause here and say, you know, when I've been at accessibility conferences, I have heard some wild, and I mean wild, debates on which things can go under which success criteria. You know, I don't live and breathe this stuff every day necessarily as far as the WCAG guidelines. At Able Tech, we test more on a general what we find wrong more often basis than with a full WCAG review. So I can answer questions about that later if you have any questions about it. I just didn't mean to bring that up too much just now because I know that's like, whoa, what are you actually doing if you're not testing with WCAG? But again, I'll explain that later if you have any questions. But there are people who just, their job is to do a compliance level review and they know these things in and out. And it is wild what they will debate with folks when they're around other accessibility experts. It's really fun to see. Okay, y'all have had a lot of good examples. So let's move on to another one. So we're going to look at success criteria 2.4.1. So this is under the principle operable. Guideline 2.4 navigable, and the actual success criteria is link, purpose, and context. And this is another level A success criteria. So again, I'm just going to ask you all, what do you think this particular success criteria means? No wrong answers. Okay, I've got someone saying navigable by keyboard, clear instructions on how to navigate to a page or resource. So I will say navigable by keyboard is in guideline 2.4 as well, but it's not quite in this one, but you were really close, Gabe. Now, Lizabelle, clear instructions on how to navigate to a page resource. Do you mind drilling down on that one more level and kind of telling me what you mean by clear instructions?
Yeah, I think
Oh, did you go muted after a second? Oh, that must not have been you. It was weird timing. Okay. I got use of titles and headers and page structure for screen readers. Headings actually has its own sections too. So you guys are coming up with all the issues, which is awesome, but they might go under different success criteria, but you're actually falling straight into my trap of a point I want to make later. So this is excellent.
so can you hear me now?
Do what? Yes, I can hear you now.
Sorry, my headphones aren't working.
Oh,
Um, so I think what my point was that on a web page where there are usually instructions that say click here now to blah blah blah, but that's not accessible. So having direct language that says visit the URL or visit a page titled da da da.
yeah, excellent. Okay, thank you for being willing to jump on and explain that a little more. So we are specifically talking about those clickable elements in this particular case. So let me see if I can switch over to a different view here. And I did not go and get a link, but basically, if we are thinking about, and I'm just putting in our AbleTech web address, a lot of the times we see links pasted into a Word document. I'm sorry, my dog is just really going at something today. I don't know what her deal is. Just a second. Okay, so sorry about that. The door is left open for her so she can go out, but it's been raining some and she's just being extra needy today. Okay, so we have a link that's been pasted in basically, and we just kind of hit enter or space after this. So we have a link now that's got the full web address in it. So now this one isn't the worst example, I will say, because it's not a super long web address, but if you've ever seen those Amazon links that you paste in, they have, www.amazon.com and then these string of letters and numbers. Well, those are all those characters are potentially going to be read out by a screen reader or other assistive technology. So we really, really don't want that. So when we're thinking about providing link purpose in context, we need to think about two things according to the success criteria. We need to think about whether or not there is text around it. So potentially, and I feel like I'm going to confuse everybody, but I will bring you out of it, I promise. So visit AbleTech's site at https://www.okabletech.org. So this is technically a link that is within a sentence. So if we're thinking about compliance only, this link does make sense in context of this whole paragraph, even though it is a full web address. So that's only if we're thinking about it from a compliance angle. But if we want to do better than that compliance, we could actually do this instead. So I'm going to take this link, this full web address, and copy it into this area in Word. And I'm going to make a link that actually says visit AbleTech's site. So now we're accomplishing that compliance angle because the link text itself actually describes what that link is taking the person to. So either of these cases is technically good for compliance. But if we're thinking about what's best for the end user, then the second example is better because they're not going to have to potentially go through all of those extra characters, having them, read out to them out loud. The other thing to think about is any person who's using a screen reader can actually pull up a list of links. So, if we were to just kind of visualize that, a full list of links, like if we saw a bunch of them that said HTTPS, www, that's not going to be super helpful. But another thing we see really often is, maybe like a paragraph, and I'm going to do this a little quick. Like I can never get this right in front of people. I'm going to put some random paragraph text in, and then I'm going to say read more, and then basically pretend this is a hyperlink for for more information about this article I just put in. Okay. So now if we think about read more, if we have a bunch of articles on the page, so like for a news widget on our homepage or just a news page on a site in general, it may say read more a lot and have that be hyperlinked. So if you're that screen reader user and you're encountering all those read more links, that's not going to be super useful either, right? So a lot of the times what we'll do when we're thinking about success criteria on this particular case down here, the read more link is actually placed outside of that paragraph content. So technically, this read more is a fail for success criteria 2.4.4 because it is not tied to that paragraph. If this was kind of connected here, it would be a different case. It would be compliant technically. But again, you know, I mentioned at Able Tech, we really don't do compliance level reviews. We do more end user usability combined with accessibility type reviews. We call them our high impact reviews. I would always recommend going with this case if you possibly can. So making your link text as descriptive as possible. Then you don't have to worry about whether it passes success criteria 2.4.4 or not. It will. All right, does anyone have any questions on that? Checking my time, about 23 minutes. All right, so the question is it too much to say visit Able Tech's site for more information? No, absolutely not. You know, we try to recommend keeping them as concise as possible, but that is more than fine to do. Yeah, sure. Anyone have any other questions? And it doesn't have to be about the success criteria either. If you have any questions about anything else we've covered or any other success criteria, we could just go over another one if you'd like. Quiet group. It is morning. I don't know what the weather's like where you all are, but again, it's a kind of sleepy day here, so I understand. All right, let me move back to my slide deck. And you know, we could do what we just did for each success criteria, but there are 50 something of them, so we don't have time to do that, unfortunately. But this is where I would really recommend looking at the resources that W3C provides. And I'm blanking on the name right now because of course I am, but I'll share that kind of after as we get to question and answer. And by the way, I will be sharing the slide deck with Eileen so she can push this out along with some resources for you to use. So all of the things I've talked about with the Department of Justice and the laws that we've talked about, as well as some of the resources on WCAG, you'll have those. So. All right, so let's move over to just kind of a more general discussion about what needs to be accessible and kind of how WCAG can apply to those things. So we've obviously talked about web content and web apps a lot because that is specifically what WCAG was written for. Software is another thing. And one thing we see really, really often is that folks who go out and are trying to purchase something or even use something that's free as far as software, they're not thinking about the accessibility of those particular tools. So like if you're trying to purchase as an organization a new content management system, you're going to need to look at the accessibility of that. Same thing for learning management systems. Or I'm not really going to hit on Canva too much, but Canva is a tool that we see a lot of people using right now for design of flyers and things like that. And unfortunately, I don't think anybody's looking at the accessibility of that. Sorry if anybody loves Canva or works for Canva in this presentation, but you know, these are the things we need to make sure of, not only that they are accessible as platforms. So can someone with a disability actually use this tool to make content? We actually need to look at the content too. Is it putting out accessible content? So just wanted to put that idea in your head. Accessibility needs to be put in as early as possible. And this includes a due diligence when you're looking at third-party platforms and tools, or if you're creating your own. All right, so hopping down off of that soapbox, we also need to make sure non-web documents, such as those created in InDesign, Microsoft Office, Google Suite, and then potentially ending up in PDF, we need to make sure those are all accessible too. Now, you may be asking why or how does WCAG actually apply to documents? Well, my answer is going to be like some of the Department of Justice guidance, a little bit loose, a little more informative than maybe what we'd like it to be. But WCAG was created as it was kind of general so that it can apply to a lot of different types of technologies and can shift with the times. So I think that's part of why the language is so difficult to understand with it. If you ever get into reading some of the success criteria pieces, it gets really technical sometimes. It's hard to digest. But anyway, it was applicable mainly for something that's displayed via a user agent, like a web browser. So that's your Chrome, Firefox, Internet Explorer, Edge, those things. So it was not specifically created to apply to those things like a document that's being created kind of as you're working on the content. Very different types of technology, something I don't understand, so I don't like to talk too much about it. We've gotten the high-level overview, and I hope that's okay. But WCAG, the Web Content, too many acronyms. The W3C WAI has created a resource called WCAG 2 ICT, which provides guidance on applying WCAG to documents. So this is going to fall into that informative category versus that normative category. So they're basically just saying these guidelines are fairly general and they can apply to documents too. And here's potentially how and other things you might need to look for differences from web content to documents. So there is a resource there that they've provided. Again, it's a long document, hard to digest, but it's there if you'd like to read it. Another thing that the W3C WAI has put out is information on PDF techniques. And if any of you are familiar with the W3C language, techniques kind of mean this is how you could do these things to accomplish accessibility. So for some reason, they've done this with PDF documents, but they haven't done it for other types of authoring tools. I've got a little screenshot in here just kind of illustrating what you'll see if you go to the PDF techniques. So it lists out PDF technique 1, applying text alternatives to image with the alt text entry in PDF documents. So this gives a little more specific information on what that 1.1.1 success criteria could look like in the PDF side of things. All right. So I mentioned a second ago that this is only for PDF, right? So what about Microsoft Word or InDesign or Canva or things like that? So there are no techniques created right now for authoring tools, but you can derive checkpoints from those PDF techniques. I think I swapped these slides too, so I'm gonna rearrange these here in a little bit, but I'd like to bring up checklists at this point. So we've actually created some checklists at AbleTech, which again, I'll share with you. And these are derived from, all of the knowledge that we have about WCAG and what we see just on a daily basis as far as accessibility barriers. If you want to kind of dig in a little bit deeper, one of the resources that we use to develop these checklists is the Health and Human Services checklist. So these are created for lots of different things, for Word, for PowerPoint, for PDF, and they actually do a really good job of tying those checkpoints back to a WCAG success criteria. So they've kind of done the work for you. And you'll find this in the accessibility space a lot. Someone's already done this, and if they're reputable, then I would say use what they've done. You don't have to recreate the wheel. So there are folks who have tried to do what the W3C WAI has not been able to just yet, such as the Health and Human Services group. So I would recommend checking them out. Now, another thing you can lean on pretty heavily is your accessibility checkers. So there's a checker called PAC 2021, and it actually does give you language for both WCAG and PDF UA. PDF UA is another international standard that pertains to accessibility, and it's different from WCAG, and we don't have time to get into that too much, and it's very specific to PDF documents and Acrobat's ecosystem in general. But anyway, the PAC 2021 checker can actually help you look at PDF documents and make sure that you're being as close to WCAG compliant as possible with the things that it can actually check for. So I'll also mention the Office and Acrobat accessibility checkers. They don't specifically call out which things pertain to which WCAG success criteria, but they're all using the same concepts, right? And I hope that you've been able to see that. So with the 2 success criteria that we pulled out, we had the text alternatives, and then we had the link text in context. So I hope that you're able to see how those apply across everything, right? We're talking web content, documents, whether those are created in InDesign or Word or PowerPoint, those concepts are the same across the board. So even though that WCAG language is really technical, you just need to think about, what does that actually mean as far as the content I'm building? So another way to think about this is, as you're building some content, you think about, okay, how would somebody with this disability use this content? And then you find a success criteria that can help you learn about what that means, and then figure out how to apply what you learned back to your content. So, I think that's a good way to think about it, to avoid being overwhelmed. Because not everybody creates videos, right? So you don't really need to delve into too much about how captions and audio description and all that should work if you're not developing that. Now, if you're an accessibility tester, different story. You need to know a little bit about a lot of things. But yeah, I think this is a good perspective for me, or it was a good perspective for me coming into the field as a new accessibility professional, and I hope that that's useful for you as well. Okay, so I am to the end of my content here. I've included my contact information. I will also pop it in the chat. My email address is lyssa.prince@okstate.edu, and I'm only saying that right now because I always forget to say it out loud. So I'm doing it before I forget. But in general, I hope you've enjoyed this adventure into the not so standard accessibility standard set that we work with. Next month, as Eileen mentioned, we're going to learn how to start building an accessibility testing process. So I hope you'll join me for that one. I really enjoy presenting about that one because I think we've got a lot of good things to share from our perspective as a really small team trying to do accessibility assessment for the whole state of Oklahoma. All right, so with that, I want to thank you all for your attention, for your participation, and I will stick around for whatever questions you have. The floor is yours. And yes, I want to reiterate too, I will be sending all of these resources and slides and everything to Eileen so she can share them out with you however she's able to.
Thank you, Lyssa. Yes, this is Eileen. We will have a recording on YouTube in about a week or so once we add the captioning to it. And I'll send out an email to everyone that's registered with the PowerPoint as well as the resources. And we'll just go ahead and leave it open for a few more minutes. You can turn your mic on if you'd like.
Yeah.
Any questions you have, feel welcome.
Yeah, this is my favorite part because sometimes I get questions that just, blow my mind. So I'm hoping you have some. And I do hope to, well, I'll just fill in the empty space because I don't like awkward silences. I really hope that you take advantage of contacting me if you need to. This is, I think a lot of the times when you start in accessibility, you feel kind of like you're alone, you don't have any resources, but I think it's important to start building your network, and we're happy to help be that beginning of the network. So just, if you ever have any questions, you have a document you're not sure about, you have any web content you're not sure about, just let me know and try to help you through it. And Kelly's asking what YouTube channel. So I believe that would be the Missouri Assistive Technology YouTube. Is that right? There we go. All right.
Yep, that's correct. Let me find a link here real quick while you're answering any other questions, and I'll paste it in the chat.
Thank you, Lyssa. This is Laura. Always good to see you. Enjoy your trainings.
Oh, thank you.
Thought a lot about you over the last 2 years with all of our technical assistance we've been providing within our state.
Good. I'm glad to hear you're using what you're learning. That's awesome. That's very awesome.
A little too much sometimes.
Yeah, I know that feeling. We're trying to do some new and different things lately. So I feel like our technical assistance has gone a little bit down. We're focusing on building some self-paced courses right now, by the way, Laura. So,
Excellent.
yeah, I think it'll be nice. You should be hearing from AT3 soon.
Perfect.
Next couple weeks.
Then we don't have to reinvent the wheel.
That's what we're hoping. You know, there are a lot of trainings out there, but we just kind of saw there was a gap, and we had some opportunity with some of our outside partners to start building these things. So we're taking them up on it, and we've got an instructional designer. He's come on board in the last few weeks and is just completely blowing our minds. So I hope that turns out to be something that you know, is good for folks who need content in a different manner than, you know, these webinars and things like that.
Perfect. Looking forward to it. Thanks again.
Thank you.